Hey guys, my name is Emily Brown. I'll be teaching a lesson on literary elements for first graders. The lesson shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. My teacher objective is the teacher will describe characters, settings, and major events in a story using key details. That's the Common Core Standard RL 1.3. So yesterday or last week we would have gone over learning the basic concepts of literary elements such as setting, characterization, and plot. So that would just give the students just a generalized concept of what those things are in a story. So for a review, we will go over the story elements chart. So that will be just a chart of where it'll just remind students that, for instance, characters can be animals, people, or things. And then the setting is when and where the story took place. So it'll just have like a picture of a house or something like that. And then the major events will show that it'll have a picture of a roller coaster, so it'll say beginning, middle, and end. I don't have a picture of the story elements chart, but it is included in where I turned in my assignment. So for a review, I'll just go over that, and then I'll ask the questions. Who can give me an example of a character from a book? So for instance, just any other book that they've ever read, what their favorite character was from that book. And then I would ask, if we were in a book right now, what would our setting be? And I would ask them to raise their hand, and hopefully they would say the classroom, because that's where we would be. And I would ask, if your life were a book, what would you consider a major event? So hopefully they'll say something like when they were born, or maybe when they lost their first tooth, or something of that sort. And hopefully that'll just be able to those questions would act as a review, but they'd also help the students make connections to everyday life. So the purpose or importance of this lesson would be to help the students understand the literary elements that make up a story and be able to apply that understanding to a story they read. The understanding of literary elements will further students' reading comprehension skills, in hopes this understanding will make them lifelong readers. So as I said before, what we would have gone over previously was the basic concepts of literary elements, setting, characteristics, and plot. Today we'll apply the literary elements to the story Where the Wild Things Are. And tomorrow we'll learn the basic concepts of the author's theme and apply it to a story. And I thought that this would be a good lesson since the students have a basic understanding of story structure, and we'll use those things to help develop the theme of a story. So my motivation would be to read Where the Wild Things Are to the students. Now, in order to make this come to life, I have masks for the students, for some volunteers to wear. And so this would be the mask for Max, which you'll understand once I read the story. And then here are some wild thing masks for the students to help me act out the story. I thought those are super cute. So this is the book, Where the Wild Things Are. Where the Wild Things Are. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. So you can see he's making mischief, which is trouble. He looks like he's trying to nail something into the wall. And another, he's chasing the dog with a fork. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything, and you can see he looks pretty upset about that. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. So you can see the trees. And grew. It's even bigger now. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. So you can see there's no more bedroom features in this one. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day. So this is a picture of Max and his private boat, which means that he has the boat all to himself. And in and out of weeks, and almost over a year to where the wild things are. You can see the wild thing, and he looks pretty scared now. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. So you can see all the wild things. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. So you can see they're all pretty scared of him. And made Max king of all wild things. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. So you can see he's the king now. And this is where I would have my students just stomp around and act like wild things, and they would keep continuing to act like wild things like the book says. You can see he's being king of all the wild things. Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. You can see he's pretty lonely. Then all around, from far across the world, he smelled good things to eat, and so he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye. And sailed back over a year, and in and out of weeks, and through the day. And into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. So there he is, back in his room, and there's his supper. And it was still hot. So I would read that book and let them act out being the wild things as a motivation. And so then we would move on to the activities, and my objective would be the learner will be able to describe the characters and setting and main events of a story with 85% accuracy, which is understand or apply Bloom's taxonomy. So for the first activity, it will be the teacher will put the characterization worksheet on the smartboard, which is this, and I got this from the Florida Resource Center. And I'll discuss with the class with who they think the main character of the story is, which would be Max. And I'll instruct them to think about what Max was like during the story, so like his behavior, what he looked like. And I'll ask what he looked like, what was he wearing, then discuss the answers with the class, which would be me modeling one of the questions. And then I would open it up for discussion, and we would discuss I would discuss with the class and allowing volunteers to give their ideas on how to answer these questions. So it would be, what does the character look like, name of the character, what would you do if you were the character, what things does the character do, that sort of thing. We would fill this out together. And hopefully this will give students the opportunity to express themselves and allow for peer tutoring. And then once we finish that, I would pass this out, this next worksheet, and it focuses on the setting for where the wild things are. And so I would discuss before they got started what they thought the setting was and where the story took place, and we'll just discuss the answers. And then I'll explain to them that they're going to draw a picture of the setting, and then they're going to write where they thought the setting was. So they'll draw the picture and then write about it. And I thought that was a cute little way to apply their knowledge of what a setting is to the story. Hopefully they'll all put his bedroom. And then we'll move on to our next activity, which will be based on main events. And it's, I'll pass this out and I'll explain that they have to draw a picture for the event that's named. So, for instance, it says, first Max was sent to his room, so they draw a picture of Max in his room, and then it says, next Max sailed across the sea to where the wild things are, so they'll hopefully draw a picture of his boat and on the ocean or the sea. Then Max became king of the wild things and led the wild rumpus, so hopefully they'll draw a picture with Max and a crown or something to that sort. So I dropped that. And then last, Max returned to his room to eat dinner, and it was still hot, so hopefully they draw him back in his room with a meal still hot, or just something along the lines that helps them to realize what was the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And then for the closure, we would go back to the story elements chart that I used for review for the last assignment. And then I'll ask them who can remember where our story took place, and hopefully they'll say Max's bedroom. And of course I'll go into detail and explain to them during the settings activity that just because there was a forest doesn't mean he ever left his bedroom. So then it would be, how did Max act like the wild things in the beginning of the story? So, of course, hopefully they'll say stuff like, well, he was chasing the dog, so he was acting rambunctious like the wild things were. And it says, who can tell me one of the main events from the story? So this goes back to this activity. Hopefully they'll say something like, he sailed across the sea to the wild things, or something of that sort. And then for the early finisher, for homework, the students will write a journal about their favorite characteristics from a story they have read in the past. So just any story that they may have read in the past, or their parents have read to them, just write a journal about what the character was like, what he wore, that sort of thing. And then for the early finishers, they'll be asked to complete the If I Were a Wild Thing activity page. They'll draw a picture of themselves being a wild thing, and then they'll tell one thing they would do as a wild thing. And then for this, the ELL learner will have access to the picture book to help give them a visual of the story. ELL learners will also have the story elements chart for reference, so a lot of visuals to help them with the activities. And then the student with a reading disability will be paired with a peer to complete activities, and the teacher will provide one-on-one time if needed. And the remediation students will be provided with pictures of the main character, setting, and main events. Students will practice identifying the literary elements by using visuals. For the enrichment, there's this activity, and it's a questionnaire. Like, it asks questions like who, what, when, and where about the story, wild things, where the wild things are. And so this will allow students to answer why and what questions about the story based on key details from the text. So, for instance, one of the questions says, why did Max have to go to bed without dinner? Or what grew in Max's room? Just stuff to make sure they have reading comprehension of the story. That is my lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed.